Hi, I'm here to read chapter 20 of Witch on the Warpath today, and last time we left Onk and Harty on the train travelling. Chapter 20, End of the Line. With Onk and Harty resting in the rear carriage, the post train journeyed down through Kent, its progress sedate until it passed Bromley South Station. A few miles south of Bromley, the train accelerated, scurrying into the bright Kent countryside full of brown fields, leaving the grey urban suburbs of London far behind. Sloping fields and meadows with oversized pillar-case sheep grazing in ones or twos sauntered past. Never sociable, sheep stroll around in that nonchalant way sheep have, not a care in the world, as if to say, no wolves here, only in fairy tales. If only they knew. Wolves don't always wear wolves' clothing. Ploughed fields ran away, row upon angled row into the distance. Frightened, brown-stained rabbits nibbled grass between the last remaining hedgerow edges. A stray male pheasant, vibrant in coloured plumage, raced back and forth like a demented dog chasing an imaginary butterfly. The train decelerated as it passed through the North Kent station towns of Dartford and Rochester, but it didn't stop. Harty listened to the elderly coal train as it mumbled comments which reflected its thoughts. If only, if only, if only, why not, why not? Short, staccato phrases repeated over and over, thoughts about ideas larger than Harty's head could imagine. At Chatham there was a loud squeal of brakes and a shunt, and the train stopped. There were several loud clangs and bangs as the train rocked backwards and forwards, violently switching tracks to take the last rail down to Canterbury East. Harty peeked out of the carriage door, which remained ajar following Lenny's expulsion. He imagined he saw the magnificent sight of Canterbury Cathedral looming on the far horizon, its towers and spires thrusting upwards to the heavens, a clear pointer of the direction of God's abode, if one were needed. Did trolls have gods? Harty mused. He did, of a sort anyway. He revered a goddess, Mother Gaia. One day he would meet her in the flesh, so to speak, but not just yet, he hoped. After a few minutes of deep philosophical thoughts, Harty changed his tack and wondered what under earth he'd got himself into. A few days ago he'd been minding his own business, sorting out a proposal for a film script deal, when, without being asked, he decided to mind somebody else's, Onk's. Why? The beautiful fairy babe, safe inside her walnut shell, had captured his heart, just as it had captured the slow lumbering trolls. Fancy that! A troll, a species known to eat the odd fairy, had fallen in love with one, and an unborn one at that. Harty looked over at Onk, snoozing on the floor of the carriage like a small fallen tree, snoring as usual. The wooden floorboards trembled in resonance to Onk's vibrating tone. Small eddies of dust lifted in short pulses of energy in time to the rhythm of Onk's inhalations. The coal train had promised to tell Harty when they reached Canterbury Station. He advised Harty they would be arriving at Canterbury East, not West. This destination meant nothing to him. He simply nodded, pleased to be safe for a short while. Settling back with a small sigh, he watched a thin strip of blue sky beyond the gap in the carriage door. Onk snored, the train mumbled, and the sky whizzed past outside. Harty pondered on what he and Onk were going to do next. They'd find his cousin Stormy first and pick out a safe place for Onk, then discuss what to do with the fairy afterwards. A good plan, provided nothing happened to change it. Unfortunately, something did. The old train, unknown to its resting occupants, had its destination altered at the last minute due to a derailment on the line at Canterbury East, apparently caused by leaves on the track. As a result, the powers that be divided the heavy coal train into two parts at Chatham, removing the last two carriages. The train, with its 6 loads of coal, would continue to journey to Dover Priory via Canterbury East as foretold, but not until the line was repaired. There was no urgency for its load, unlike the post, which had deadlines to keep. It would be held over in a siding between. It felt guilty not being able to warn its occupants, but the uncoupling and changeover had taken mere minutes. The 2 remaining carriages, containing the post bound for Thanet, were hitched up to the newly arrived lightweight passenger train from London Victoria. As Harty mused and Onk slept, the reassembled electric train, not suspecting it had any occupants, stopped at all the points along its usual commuter route. First Faversham and Whitstable, then Chesterfield, Herne Bay, Margate, and various smaller stops in between, ending its journey at its final destination and end of the line, Ramsgate. "Ramsgate! Ramsgate!" yelled Harty, failing to contain his frustration at being stranded so far from their expected station in Canterbury. He fumed as the apologetic passenger train took off, leaping into the distance and out of Harty's firing line. "End of the line, end of the line," repeated the train with its low sigh that could be heard whistling along the tracks. It turned the bend and, happily for the train, disappeared out of Harty's sight. The mid-morning London Victoria to Ramsgate passenger train had been overwhelmed with remorse when it arrived at Ramsgate just after 10. It begged Harty's eternal forgiveness after it found them disembarking from its additional carriages. It thought the carriages heavy that morning, but put it down to extra post from the weekend. Now it saw Onk, it realised it had been lugging a great big dirty city troll along too. That explained a great deal, including the smell. It shuddered. It was sure it had strained something vital, pulling that heavy monster down to Ramsgate. There wasn't a train back to Canterbury East until the line was repaired tomorrow. Harty knew in his heart it wasn't the commuter train's fault, but he needed someone to shout at. The insipid passenger train supplied him with a convenient target. Onk, being too big and unpredictable to yell at, was left alone. Harty vented his frustration further by kicking the post carriage, to which the train tooted unhappily. Onk grinned in a wise "that won't work" way. This infuriated Harty even more, so he kicked the platform, the railings, and the benches too, just for good measure, not unlike an upset teenager. He then spent the next 15 minutes hugging his bruised toes and cooling his dented ego. They trudged out of the station, neither knowing what else to do. Both were tired and despondent, despite their long rest on the train. Staring down Station Approach Road from the station doors, they saw it led off both east and west. Neither had a clue which direction to take. Each road appeared identical, going nowhere exciting. Each seemed as good or as bad as the other. The immediate area was residential, rows of bland, magnolia-coloured, detached and semi-detached houses lining the once pretty avenue. Gone were the precious life-giving trees which gave the avenue its character and its class. All that remained were scars in the pavement where trunks had been hacked out, and ripples in the tarmac where questing roots once grew. Harty could make out the outline of a huge Victorian factory building on the horizon. It looked imposing and important. Maybe, he thought, they should head towards it. And that's where we end today's chapter. Let's see what happens to Harty and Onk next time while they're in Ramsgate. Join me for the next chapter. Goodbye.